So let's turn to Paul in just a moment, but just these three brief examples, very briefly looked at from Clinton to the jury and the common law, really provide, I think, sort of a picture of what we're talking about. Largely secular, occasionally religious rhetoric of anti-legalism. And let's just close this part with one remark made in 1846 by James Jackson, later Justice Jackson. The intricacy of the law, arising from its technicalities, has been and still is the cause of much censure upon the profession of the advocate. Some men seem to regard the law as a mere piece of mechanism, a form without spirit, words destitute alike of philosophy and meaning. Or in other words, the letter kills and the spirit gives life. Right? Paul from 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 6. Or Paul in Galatians chapter 5, verse 4. You who want to be justified by the law have cut yourself off from Christ. You have fallen away from grace. For Paul, law is not merely inconvenient, it's a mistake. Let's return to that question of circumcision for a moment. For Paul, circumcision of the flesh, adhering to the letter of the law, the old covenant, mistakes what the essence of the human being is. It supposes that the body is the essence. What's important about the human is the body. Real circumcision is circumcision of the heart, about the spirit associated with the spirit of the law. This was the new covenant. Not the body, but the spirit. Now, of course, in the beginning, there is the body. We all have bodies. We all see them. We all see that they pass away. But this was precisely the problem for classical philosophers who asked, if we pass away, what are we? How do we understand life in the face of change? What's the essence of the human being? For Plato and his descendants, the answer was the soul. Likewise for Paul. If you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, Paul emphasizes the dichotomy between this mortal flesh and the immortality of the spirit. Circumcision of the flesh traps one in the realm of the body. Literal law traps one in the realm of the body. Only the conscience, only the spirit, only the soul is connected to salvation itself. Flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable, Paul again. This disembodiment of ultimate value had immense political import. Right now, if their physical body is devalued, so too the physical race or people to whom a person belongs. Differences are effaced. The universal soul, not tribe or clan, are of concern to a universal God. As with ontology, so with jurisprudence. Just as Paul values the spirit of the human of the flesh, he values the spirit of the law over its letter. Here's Paul in the book of Romans. He is not a Jew who is one outwardly, nor is circumcision something external and physical. He is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is a matter of the heart, spiritual and not literal. In Galatians, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision counts for anything. The only thing that counts is faith, working through love. And so the literal law in Paul is at best irrelevant, at worst a radical misunderstanding of means and ends. To the Galatians, Paul writes, you who want to be justified by the law, as I said before, have cut yourself off from Christ. If you live according to the flesh, you will die. This essential analogy, right, is the essence. And in the paper, I go into much more detail looking at Luther and looking at Aquinas and natural law and also looking at Augustine. This is the essence of the meaning of law itself. Right? Law, the physical law, the shell of the law, the outward manifestation of the law, which is only about the body, is itself the law of the Jews. It's the law of the Old Testament. Law is Jewish because the new covenant has superseded the old. Right? Law is about the body and the external and the shell, or the whitewashed tombs, to use Jesus' metaphor. And again, in the paper, there's sort of a long suggested counterexample of Judaism as a jurisprudence of the flesh. But I'll have to leave all of that aside for now, as well as the discussion of natural law. So I just want to put a little quote from Luther, just to bring us a little bit into speed, and again refer you to the paper. For Luther, to rely on the external law and the concomitant belief in the materiality of ritual, it implies also justification by works instead of by faith. In other words, in the new rhetoric of the Protestant Reformation, leaping forward a millennium and a half, the problem is even worse, because now it assumes that acts rather than faith are important. Here's a quote from Luther. For what God has given the Jews from heaven, he has also written in the hearts of all men. Right? The law coming from heaven in the form of the Torah, written in the hearts of all men in the form of the new covenant. I think reading closely the anti-legalism arguments from key moments of Anglo-American legal history, placing the New Testament alongside them, one cannot help but notice certain affinities in the way that the law is conceived. Sometimes this link is acknowledged, sometimes it's not. But in the core assumption that law governs only the surface of human life, and that there is a deeper immaterial spirit that it cannot touch, lies the germ of anti-legal discourse and its religious origin. Now, elsewhere in my research, and there's not going to be time here, I want to link this anti-legalism, anti-Judaism piece with the anti-lawyerism, anti-Semitism piece that Mark just talked about a moment ago, because it's really quite a curious coincidence, right? On the one hand, law is conceived of as in some way Jewish, right, mechanistic, and the same rhetoric and the same kind of languaging as in the dominant ideology of American popular culture. Right? So law is Judaized. And on the other hand, there's this curious fact that lawyers are Judaized as well, but in a completely different way. Right? We see lawyers Judaized according to the sort of the memes of the Shylock stereotype, right? A bloodsucker, greedy, parasitic, corrosive, destructive, deceitful, heartless, soulless. Right? Just sort of imagine Shylock poised at the climactic moment of the Merchant of Venice trial, making his stand for justice and embodying at one moment both the anti-legalistic and the anti-Semitic caricatures of the Jewish law. And of course, it should go without saying that there's no correlation in this rhetoric of anti-legalism and anti-lawyerism between the rhetoric and the facts. So the litigation explosion, as Professor Galanter more than anyone else has shown, is a myth. Right? The facts, the sort of underlying ideologies that sort of underlie this rhetoric are in fact mythic ideologies, not realistic ones. So there is this striking correlation. Perhaps it's no surprise, in conclusion, in an age when the guiding principles of the secular American state are threatened, as never before, to discover that our civic discourse remains shot through with religious terms and assumptions. Ours is a moment at which the stirrings of the soul are once more at the center of American political life. Religion may not be the operative ideology for American legal or academic elites, but it is the most significant force, in recent years at least, in how we choose our leaders, how our leaders make decisions, and how good and evil are adjudicated, not in the courts of law, but in the marketplace, the legislatures, and the inner sanctuaries of the spirit. The spirit, not the letter. The conscience, not the law. The spirit, not the body. This, we have been told for 2 millennia, is how we are to live in accordance with the plan of God. But it was not always thus. Thank you.